So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the differences in history between tarot cards and bone throwing to predict the future. I might be a little biased, but hopefully this video will help you decide which is best for you. Now, I always thought tarot cards have been around for hundreds of years and probably made by some gypsies in Transylvania. But really, that's not the case at all with tarot cards. But actually, these tarot cards aren't really that mysterious. They were invented by the French occultists back a little over 100 years ago. That's why you buy these tarot original cards. It's 1909. So, they really aren't that old. And really what these French people did was they took a deck of cards, a regular standard deck, added 22 cards to it, and then basically came up with all these claims how it could predict the future. So, they basically just invented tarot cards about 100 years ago. For us nowadays, these seem like kind of magical cards and stuff. But back a couple hundred years ago, like every region had its own deck of cards with its own pictures, and they had different suits. So instead of the hearts and clubs we know today, they might have had wands or shields or clubs or whatever. So there was just different suits. So really, this deck is a basic deck of cards with 22 extra cards stuck in there. So that is really where tarot cards came from. Now bone throwing has been around for thousands of years. It's in the Bible. So it's been around forever, and I think of it like more an ancient kind of technique to predict the future. Back in those days though, they didn't always use all bone sets. Sometimes they used stones or sticks or shells along with their sets. But most of the videos nowadays that I see using multiple items besides just straight up bones is kind of hard to interpret how they're actually throwing those bones and how to predict with them. So to me it was kind of confusing using all these trinkets along with bones. So for me, bone throwing is with bones. So I think bone throwing is actually really misinterpreted as like a voodoo witchcraft kind of thing, but it really isn't. It really stems from ancient times, biblical times, and these bones were cast by the Israelites back in the day to determine God's will. And so it really didn't start as this voodoo thing. It was more a kind of a religious thing. And the Bible even says, I'll have to read it here, in Proverbs 16:33, it says, "The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord." So, right there, they did use these bones, but the Bible, to be fair and not just quote certain things, it also talks about you shouldn't be casting objects for occult or superstitious reasons. And so, the Bible would say, if you're using these bones for good, to do God's will, it's fine. But if you're using them as some voodoo occult thing, it's not really right. I kind of go with the voodoo thing on my website just because it's a lot cooler pictures and stuff, and it might spark more interest. So I kind of roll with the voodoo thing, but it's really not. So that was kind of the history of these two methods. But now let's talk about which one might be best for you. Now, I had a whole deck of these when I was younger, in my 20s, with a big old book with it. And that's really my problem with tarot cards. I really never got into it because, the sheer number of these cards is incredible. So to me, you can't really remember what each card means unless you're really serious into tarot card reading. And so, there's 78 different cards in the deck. And if they are flipped around, it has a totally different meaning. So really you're looking at 156 different meanings in this deck to keep track of. And so to me, I would always need a book, always. And I have a friend that's into readings, and she said, like, well, sometimes you can look at a card and it kind of tells you what the card means. And I did look through some of these cards, and some do. You could probably tell if you read it once, but some of these don't. And so I would still always need this big old book to interpret these. So in bone throwing, there's really only 9 bones in a standard set and 13 bones in what I'm calling a complete set. And so there's a whole lot less to remember. Here's a cheat sheet for all the bones. So this is really all you need to know. And what makes it easier is that usually the bones have a specific purpose in the body. And so that's also what the bones represent when you cast them. So this bone right here is a xiphoid bone. And in a chicken, this is the bone that really supports all the attachment points for muscles and stuff. So it's like an anchor for the muscles to attach to. I mean, it even looks kind of like an anchor. So then it's easier to remember, because what is an anchor in your life? So if you look at your cheat sheet right here, I mean, it's a foundation or anchoring force in your life, which could be family, friends, a job, career, or bonds. And so to me, it's a lot easier to remember that. Now, you might not get as much detail in a reading because the tarot has 156 cards with a lot of meanings, so it may be more detailed in answering a question, but at the same time, maybe that detail isn't that great. But even though there's only 13 bones, I mean, you can still get more information just by the way they're oriented. So take this, a wishbone. Everybody knows what a wishbone is, so you already know one of the 13 bones. And this is a breastbone, which protects the heart, and it's kind of about love. And so if you had a wishbone and it was landed like this, pointing towards this, that would say like your wish of love will come true. And if it's the opposite way, like this, it would be pointing like a divining rod, pointing to this, and it would be saying that you will, desire love as a wish. And so there's a lot of extra meanings besides just the 13. But with bone throwing, you can go as far as you want. You could just stick with the 13 meanings and keep it easy, or you could really, go into all the depth of how the bones are aligned and related to each other. So for ease of learning, the bones are the way to go. Now let's talk about cost. Now if you bought a deck of cards and a book, compared to with the bones I offer on my site, bonethrowing.org, they're actually pretty similar in price. So it's not a big difference if you're buying them. Although the thing with bones is you can really make your own bone set. I mean, if you cook chickens a lot, you have a lot of chicken bones, so you could just make your own set. And on my website, and another video I have, it tells you how to make your own bone set. So basically it's free. And so you could just make your own bone set, come to my website, all the instructions is right there for free. So really bones for cost is the way to go. Now, the only bad things I've heard from the naysayers, they don't like the plastic bones as much because they're not real bones. But to me, tarot cards are just paper and plastic printed on modern day printing machines. So there's nothing magical about those cards. But with the bones, I do like to add like extra energy to my throwing area. And so I might add like a goat's horn, or I use 100-year-old wheat pennies as markers, or, a goat's horn, or, something alligator's tooth, to provide more energy around the throwing area. So that's kind of the difference between the tarot cards and the bone throwing for predicting the future. Now the tarot cards might give you a little more detail, but the bones are a lot easier to learn, and you can really make your own set and learn how for free. And so I would say bone throwing is the best, but you can make your own decision. I hope this video helped you in some way. The bones know everything. The bones know everything. The bones know everything.